Welcome everybody to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I am Josh Fenton. It is Business Monday. I've got Gary Sass here, the money man. Cha-ching. Let's see. Let's jump into it. Budget Friday by 10 o'clock at night. Shockingly early evening for Speaker Mattiello. Barely a fight over a single budget item or article. What's your take on this new fiscal 19 budget facing Rhode Islanders?
Well, I think there are two ways to look at it. As far as the budget document for next year, starting next month,
yeah.
As you and I have discussed previously, it's an election year budget. They tried to restore some of the cuts the governor felt compelled to make because revenues weren't as good in November as they turned out to be in May. So every interest group has been satisfied. As far as the structural issues are concerned, they didn't make things any worse. It probably stayed, about the same. You can always find things in budgets that you don't like. For example, expanding the sales tax to services. But by and large, it was a garden variety election year, budget, one that one would expect. So I can't get very excited. The decisions made at the end were primarily to restore monies that the governor cut for human services, for Medicaid payments to hospitals, for payments for developmentally disabled people, which were cut back. They were the same kinds of political deals in a budget that happened in an election year. Some good things happened too. Some of the scoops from the quasis were restored.
Put back in. Only $4 million in scoops, right? Just the infrastructure?
Yeah, but they still took money from DOT and put that in the general fund. And when license and registration fees went up, we were assured that the DOT highways would become more self-sufficient. And it's kind of a oxymoron in policy. We put in tolls because we need money, and then we take funds from dedicated transportation monies and put it in the general fund. With 9/11, they really didn't cure the problem. They
renamed it.
They renamed it.
If you rename something, isn't that the same thing?
Well,
didn't we rename UHIP? Now it has a new name.
But what if you rename a rose? Would it still be a rose?
Yeah, that's right.
And so there's nothing to say. I think the real story about the budget, which is a little more esoteric and more difficult to report, is what are the future implications of the budget. And in many ways, this budget is built on sand. And let me tell you why I think so. Each year, as everybody knows, there's 2 meetings of something called a Revenue Estimating Conference,
right,
which consists of fiscal experts from both branches of government, legislative and executive branch. And they come up with the consensus forecast for revenue. The forecast of revenue they come up in November is used by the governor to present a budget, and the forecast in May is used by the legislature to adopt a budget. But what they also come up with, which we don't speak about as much, and I think is very important, are the underlying economic assumptions behind that budget. So what are the economic conditions that the budget's based upon? And they are also required to project out those economic conditions over the future, over the next 4 or 5 year period. And when I say the budget is built on sand, that is predicated by what you see when you see what the economic projections are going forward. So, for example, this month there are 500,000 plus workers in Rhode Island. They project by 2024 that number will reach 509,700, or almost 510,000. I think that's a little bit understated because we were doing better in the short run. But if over a 5-year period your employment grows from, say, roughly 501,000 to 512,000, that's a gain of 12,000 positions. That's employment growth of about 0.6% a year. That's pretty anemic. If you look at the labor force in March was about 558,000. Back in January of '07, it was about 574,000. There were 15 or 16,000 more people in the labor force, which we haven't recovered. So they're not stellar numbers on employment growth. And then you look at other numbers we created about 43,000 jobs over a 10-year period, roughly from 2009, mid-fiscal year 2009.
Coming out of the Great Recession into this year.
Yeah, but 28%, almost a third of the jobs pay less than $35,000. About a third of the jobs, 27%, pay more than $60,000. So when you look at the kind of jobs that we're creating, they're jobs, and we should be grateful, but they're not good-paying jobs. And the economic forecast going forward says we'll see growth in health, we'll see growth in financial services and professional services, but the jobs are predicated to be at the lower end of the scale.
Yeah.
So when you look at the job numbers, you see anemic growth over the next 5 years in jobs. Growing 10,000 jobs in 5 years is not a great number. And then when you look at the types of jobs being created, you really have to scratch your head and say, why are we spending hundreds of millions of dollars from Commerce, Rhode Island to create jobs, but they're low-end jobs. So and that drives future budgets.
Right.
The unemployment rate currently is about 4.4%. At the end of by 2024, it's programmed to go back up close to 5%, about 4.95%. So all the economic assumptions that deal with employment, deal with unemployment, are going in the wrong direction.
Sure.
And we've adopted a budget without addressing our fiscal problems. So the question always becomes, and this is more this year than in past years, okay, that we're in a good part of an economic cycle now. The economy is good. All states are benefiting. A rising tide in this case really is lifting
absolutely.
all ships. But the forecast that they've used for their own economic assumptions shows the cycle slowing down, and the budget's based on that. Then on the spending side, there's also some concern. The average rate of inflation over the next 5 years is predicted to be about 2.3%.
Right.
It goes from about 2.2 to 2.8 depending upon the year. Well, our spending growth this year was about 3.9%. So our spending growth is growing at a significant multiple of inflation.
Will we have a little more bravado, though, in once they get through this election year, and next year maybe they're a little more aggressive in limiting the growth of spending? This clearly was a year in which there was some good news on the revenue side, and they grabbed every last penny plus to be able to do the re-election of every incumbent that they possibly could, both on the House, Senate, and in the governor's office. I mean, is that could we see some improvement next year, or do we only make improvements in our spending structure when we're in tough times?
Well, crisis is the best.
Don't want to waste a good crisis.
Momentum, right? Well, it depends on where leadership. What kind of leadership exists. Both in the governor's office and in the House and the Senate. But a lot of the decisions made increase the base. So when you put $18 million, I think, back into DD Development Disabled programs, that's $18 million that's there, unless she wants to, or whoever the next governor is wants to cut it back. When you deal with Medicaid expansion, and you have a third of the state on Medicaid, that's a budget driver.
You know what was interesting? Passed the budget on Friday night. Not Friday night, not Saturday, not Sunday, not today. Not one. Patricia Morgan, the only one. No press release from the Republican Party on the budget. No press release from...
Well, I did see a press release from the Republican Party.
Really?
I did. I also saw a...
Fung didn't say poop?
No, well, and I also saw a comment the night the budget passed in the House from the governor's communications director. Mike put out a statement.
Yeah. Well, the governor absolutely made a comment.
Yeah, there were comments. There were comments made. There's not a lot to crow about, so
But the GOP didn't really. There was no organized critique of a budget that was approved, whatever it was, 66-7 or something.
Well, I did see a statement that raised some issues about the budget that the GOP did put out. Minority leader, obviously made a lot of...
She did,
a lot of statements about the budget. It's hard when you're not... the person that's empowered to make the statements about the budget is really the minority leader. You don't have a sitting executive. But those statements came from both the party and the minority, most from the minority leader. But next year, when you look at what the budget drivers are, we haven't indicated the political will to address those budget drivers. So unless you get into Medicaid, unless you... school aid is a good example. School aid this year increased. This is general aid. There
Yeah.
are other programs that increased as well. But school aid increased by $6.4 million. That's nothing.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of put more pressure on property taxpayers. So when you say they're going to bring the budget back under control, then I say, where is the political will to deal with the budget drivers? And, you know, you can talk about, you know, wasting.
Well, it's really more than that on schools, because if the schools want to take advantage of the $250 million bond, they're going to need to generate some additional money to be able to fund those things.
Right, and we still don't, and there are equity issues that, you know, need to be addressed. We're working with some people on the question of school equity. Some of the districts with the poorest performing schools, they get money if you just look at it in a nominal sense.
Sure.
But in terms of what's needed to educate those kids, there are equity questions that need to still be addressed. So, you know, school funding is not a place to cut, my point. Not a place to cut Medicaid, with the rolls growing and us being involved in Medicaid expansion, adding 75,000 people to the rolls. Some of the cuts the governor did make in social services, which is 40% of the budget, were restored. So once they're restored, it's hard to take them.
Yeah, get them back out.
Hard to take them back out. We know debt service is going to be increased. Just to do with the amount of debt that we're going to be assuming, that debt service will be increased. So it's easy to say, you know, cut the budget. But you need the leadership, and you need the political will, and you need the direction, and you need a strategy. Neil Steinberg from the Rhode Island Foundation had an interesting piece. He says, we don't have a strategy to do things that are important.
Yeah.
And he was talking about health and education. Well, health and education are two of the biggest drivers of the budget. And if you don't have a strategy, that means you don't have a direction. If you don't have a direction, you have faulty leadership.
Bob Whitcomb had in his roundup this weekend, had a piece. It's not the first time he's hit a little bit of the warning button about the state of the American economy, worried that we are in a bubble situation and that we could replicate the 07, 08 fiscal meltdown, that there's some indicators that say we're over leveraged, and there's some core issues of fundamentals that are wrong with what's going on. What's your thoughts?
Well, you know, we talked about the lack of leadership in terms of monetary and fiscal policy. You know, the Trump administration talks about tax cuts and talks about the regulatory issues, which are helping the economy in the short run. I think all economists, whether on the left or right, now see that those have been temporary stimulus. But I think we have to be very careful about debt. Debt, you know, is an issue affecting homeowners now. About 40% of homes have credit card debt. The average is over $11,000. The federal government debt just is, you know, it's just marching along. You know, it's at $20 trillion. It's been increased by another trillion. The debt service cost now is about 350 or so.
We're at 20 trillion now. When the Great Recession hit, we were at about 8 trillion.
8 to 12, I don't remember.
Yeah. And so we don't have the flexibility that we had to be able to respond.
No, but we're crowding out money because currently debt service, so the interest we pay on the debt, the federal debt's about $350 billion. It's going up to almost $1 trillion. It's going up to 918, you know, billion in the next decade, the next 10 years. That's going to crowd out our ability to do things. Social Security now is moving back into a troubled area again. So, you know,
Are we surprised, though, that this president, here's a guy who, you know, always leveraged his businesses, always worked off the bank's monies,
had 4 bankruptcies.
Has had a number of bankruptcies in his casino business, especially. Are we really surprised that this is his fiscal policy? And you know, where's the check on that? Don't we have conservative Republicans in the House and the Senate that are supposed to be keeping an eye on these things?
And also their Democratic colleagues. But that's the great challenge and unknown. You know, this president, I don't think, has a fiscal policy. I certainly am not impressed with his trade team, his commerce team.
Right. Is Secretary of Treasury a Goldman Sachs guy?
Well, there's nothing wrong with being a Goldman Sachs guy, except he wanted to take his wife out to Fort Knox to see the gold.
Yeah, and boy, oh boy, Goldman Sachs was about this far away from collapsing in the last fiscal crisis if it weren't for a certain guy from Omaha, Nebraska, who bailed them out. Made some money bailing them out.
So the fiscal policy, I think there are really, challenges. And the debt picture, the old saying is that those that don't learn from history are bound to repeat it. So just one historical thing, which wasn't that long ago, a decade ago, 2005, 2006, up to 2008, prices, the value of homes were escalating.
Right.
So people, borrowed money against the equity, so they got cheap debt and they had overpriced homes. Finally, the market figured out, they put together these mortgage-backed securities. The most dangerous profession in the country now is financial engineering.
Right.
Yeah. So these financial engineers put together these mortgage-backed bonds, and then when the market realized that home values and stock values weren't worth the debt, the market crashed.
So we're in hyperinflation in housing prices, right? In Rhode Island, we're up dramatically.
But the Rhode Island situation is fascinating because the housing starts are just growing by 1.5, maybe 2%, but they're growing very slightly. But they're not even growing where most of the people need affordable housing. They're growing at the top of the market. And those prices are escalating. But learning from the housing, so that was the housing bubble, and so the bubble we're moving into now is the corporate bubble. Now, I'm not as much of a pessimist as some others, but there's certainly something to be concerned about. So these corporations have great profits. The economy is going strong. Most corporations' profit sheets look pretty good. Also, they benefited from the corporate changes in the corporate tax structure, from the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. So what they're doing with some of that money is they're cashing out and they're buying back
some of their own debt.
Their own debt. And the people that benefit from buying back some of their own debt are the investors on Wall Street and some of the CEOs and upper-level executives. There's a redistribution problem when they do that. So, that's another driver of debt. But got back to our friends the financial engineers.
Yeah.
They're not going to miss an opportunity to make a buck. So we've come up with it several years ago with exchange-traded funds, which are really nothing more than just a portfolio of different corporate bonds, probably a pretty safe investment. But now we have collateralized loan obligations, and those are being basically sliced and diced, just like the old...
Like we did back 10 years ago.
Like the mortgage bonds, and we don't know where that's going to go, but this is where it gets tricky. There are two areas it gets tricky. So it's not just corporate debt that's growing. I said it's government debt, and it's also household debt. Those are growing right now. And where it gets really tricky is that the Fed Fed policies on credit and supply of funds are going back to the normal levels. So you can expect to see rate increases, and so debt service costs are going to increase, and that's where the bubble can bust. Now, and then we live in such uncertain times, which I would never even pretend to predict, but we have unpredictable trade policies in this country right now. The president screams at his allies and pats his enemies, our old enemies, on the back, says he's going to do something, and somebody says something nice to him, he says he's going to do something else. And so there's a tremendous unpredictability. There's unpredictability in Europe with Brexit. And so we have what I've just described as increasing corporate debt with a changing interest rate environment as the Feds go through this, and a tremendous amount of economic uncertainty.
What's your prediction on the next, when will we see the next economic dip from a national level?
Oh, I don't predict dips. I just predict upticks. Yes, I'm not predicting the dip.
You're only a good news guy. You're only about the growth side.
If one was predicting a debt, we've had a 7 or 8 year recovery.
Right.
It's been an anemic recovery.
Yeah.
But it's been a recovery nevertheless. And I just don't. I normally I would have predicted it 2 years ago. When that didn't happen, so I've stopped predicting downs. I really don't know.
Last issue. We've seen probably one of the most high pressure, intense, frenetic races for governor, certainly of my lifetime. On average, we're receiving functionally about 10 press releases a day over the past 10 days. Is there a chance these folks are all going to exhaust themselves before we hit August 1st?
Well, it's not a question of them exhausting themselves. Are they going to exhaust themselves before they say anything relevant? That's the real issue. You know, I'd like to see them exhaust themselves explaining their education plan or their health plan. I'd like to see them exhaust themselves explaining why Commerce Rhode Island corporate welfare, you know, what it's doing, what it's not doing, where it's been successful, where it's been unsuccessful. And instead, you know, we're back to the schoolyard throwing mud pies. So yeah, they may get tired throwing mud pies, which is really unfortunate because, you know, we don't have a health care plan for the state. We don't have an education strategy. We have an economic development plan, which the governor crows about and has had some successes. But the numbers I quoted earlier about what the projected job growth is, what the projected the economics, the salaries and wages of the jobs that are being created, you know, really make you scratch your head and to understand what we're buying. So we have a lot of important issues to discuss, and we have intelligent people running for office, and they want to be discussing these issues, but instead it's I got you, and I hope they exhaust themselves with I got you and get back to some of the policy concerns.
Well, thank you as always. Insight here with the money man Gary Sass, bringing us really the expert insights into exactly what's going on at the federal level, over at Wall Street and at the Rhode Island State House. Thank you as always.
My pleasure.
And we'll keep watching the maturations that are going on at all levels. We're going to be right back with Megan Decker from G Media talking about blockchain in an amorphous term that really needs some definition and how blockchain technology is going to be applied across a lot of sectors of business over the next short term, next 24, 36 months, what the implications are. We'll be right back at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. We are back at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I am Josh Fenton. This is Megan Decker. She's the president of GE Media. We are going to be talking about blockchain technology. It is a buzzword that seems to be that no one literally knows the definition of. Do you want to give a little 101 insight into how blockchain technology works?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely a buzzword that's out and about town, and there's a lot of, okay, can we trust this? Can we not? But we're now living in a world that's going to be a lot about cryptocurrency. So we're currently, G Media has taken on a very large, prominent client called Alchemist.
Yeah.
And we're doing everything from their branding to social media, PR, the whole gamut. And they're actually advisors in this space because I think there's a lot of talk about ICOs and cryptocurrency,
right.
Bitcoin, smart contracts, and they're very much an advisor in this space. But yeah, no, right now there's a lot of ICOs out there. There's a lot of people playing in this space, but this goes all the way back to, I think, Overstock was the first company to offer up the opportunity to use it as a currency. So it essentially is a safe coded currency that you can use online.
Right.
I can buy myself if you and I want to share a very expensive piece of artwork that still stays in my home, you can own a piece of it.
Why does it stay in your home if we're sharing the cost of it? I'm a little upset about this Picasso.
I know. But you can have it on the weekends.
But it's a technology that allows for really because of the coding, because of the structure of it, really allows for at least right now, an ultimate level of security. That the ability to hack into a blockchain is minimized by orders of magnitude that we've never seen before. We're sort of leveraging technology and how information moves at a level of encryption that protects the consumer within that genre.
Exactly, and you know when this all kind of came out into the market, I think there was talks of the utility coin that wasn't quite as secure, but still in place, the security token, and then Ethereum, which with Ethereum being a strong unbreakable code, the founder at Alchemist, our client, is actually part of creating that through the legal background and ensuring the security of it. So we're excited to partner with them.
And then all these terms kind of get lumped together, and I think it's concerning for people, and they can't differentiate. Bitcoin is just straight up a currency, and it does not enjoy the same level of security as a blockchain offers, correct?
Yes.
And cyber currency is an element that can be run through a blockchain for protection and ultimate security, right?
Correct.
Okay, so the implications of this are dramatic. In our world, news organizations are now prophesizing that maybe we could use blockchain as a new way of creating the internet so that newspapers or whomever is producing content can monetize the content that they're able to produce. And I say, well, that's great, but are we really going to be able to change everyone's behavior in a short period of enough time that's going to allow for that sort of thing? Talk a little bit about what's the growth, what's happening, how is it being transmitted? We've had some other folks on blockchain here, folks from IBM, some of the other organic folks in Rhode Island who are trying to do it. What's the ramp up on this? When is it that the average company is going to start leveraging blockchain technology?
Well, I think companies already are. I mean, absolutely, like IBM, they're definitely looking to own the name and in this space. I think a lot of companies want to own the term and be the first to market. So from there, it's kind of a free-for-all. But I think for me, the way I look at it, and having a lot of really insightful conversations, especially with Alchemist, and these folks are, true leaders and thought leaders in this space. I think we're looking at a 5-year plan.
Right.
I mean, it is already, I think if you're not thinking about it for your company, you should definitely be doing your research, and then you have your bigger companies like the IBMs who have entire task force that are dedicated just to this.
And is it going to be one of those situations which big companies win and little companies lose? I mean, if you're a company that has 30 employees, you may have somebody who's dedicated to technology, but you're probably outsourcing it to a third party. Are you really going to be able to invest in the level of expertise where the local vendors who help you with your email strategy and your web strategy literally don't even employ somebody who has any expertise? How's that going to work? Or is it just going to be one of those cases, the Amazons get bigger, the eBays get bigger, and mom and pop who are trying to come up with a digital strategy get further and further behind?
See, I mean, I think that's a really interesting question and point. You know, and that's what I really enjoy working with Alchemist on is, you know, they're very much a strategic advisor. They're not just starting up an ICO. They're investing in companies.
Sure.
They're partnering as a strategic advisor, and they're taking the partners in the network they have to help small or mid-sized companies do the same thing. So they're working with the large, huge organizations that have, you know, the big money behind them.
Yeah.
But they're also working with the middle-sized companies that are, you know, they don't have maybe a huge amount to invest, but they still want to play in the game. They're working with the folks that have the smart thought behind their company and vision, and they're starting with a lot of startups that haven't even opened up yet, but they want to make sure that they can be the investors behind them.
In 3 to 5 years, will I go to Best Buy and go to the Geek Squad and get advice on technology applications that get my business in a more protected structure within blockchain applications, or will I go to Staples, or what will be the solution for the smaller business?
I don't know. If you know, let me know. I'm not sure.
Media's new division of small SMBs.
Right? I mean, and people are talking about that. I mean, there's a lot of questions of joint ventures. Do agencies need to be focused on this? I know even for me, looking for the right staff that can fit these type of clients, it's an interesting fit to find that resume.
Will all money begin to move through
Yes.
cryptid currency, and to the level in which I swipe my iPhone at Dunkin' Donuts, will that be to that level?
I hope so. Right? The easier the better. I think so. I think it's definitely going to be something that whether you're a large or small firm, you're going to have to be able to bend and be ready to take this on as a way of doing transactions.
And as a marketing firm that's advising, you know, a range of different clients, from large insurance companies to regional manufacturers, are folks now talking to you? Are they asking about it? They know you're working with one of the leading firms. Are they sort of saying, help us get smart on this quickly? And how do we get smart on this quickly?
Yes. We're definitely getting...
You're not allowed one-word answers to any question. You can't just go, yes.
No. No one's calling us at all.
Not one person has even remotely brought up an issue.
We took the phones off the hook. We have had a lot of other companies follow suit based on this relationship.
Yeah.
To help us with their marketing needs, because you can't be an expert at everything. And one thing I know you and I were chatting is, you look at a lot of these, the advertising that's being done out of these type of industry clients.
Yeah.
And they're experts in this space, not in advertising. So it's been a great opportunity to help with the marketing, because you can't be an expert at everything, right? I'm not an expert at blockchain, but I'm really good at branding.
Right.
So from that standpoint, it's definitely a new marketing industry for us.
So, you know, you used to see adoption curves of technology. You know, I think it took something like 50 years for TV, from the time it was first commercially offered to the point that it penetrated 50% of the households. It took 50 years for TV. It took broadband only like 10 years to do it, but it still took 10 years for broadband, something like that, 10 years. How long is this adoption curve going to be for blockchain technology to be adopted? And I'll just say in the B2B world, what's that going to look like? Is this going to be, you know, just a rocket, and that in a year from now we'll laugh about the discussion we had previously, and that it will ramp up so quickly? Or is it going to be a slow prod with fits and starts and technology hiccups and some bad press here, and then get back on track?
I think it's definitely going to be something that we're going to see a shift pretty quickly over the next 5 years. And I think within that 5 years to 7 years,
Yeah.
we're going to see how it impacts Wall Street, how it impacts the banking facility. I think people's roles and responsibilities are going to shift within every organization from B2B to B2C. But I think over the next 5 years, we're definitely going to see a change in how we're doing transactions. Just like I'm sure when the credit card came out,
Right.
the handing of a piece of plastic
Right.
seems like a very strange thing, or a check. Here is a piece of paper. I'm
Right.
good for it.
Yeah, I think the ATM was a 25 year
Yeah.
application.
What I think is the real hot topic that everyone's trying to get their head wrapped around is, can I trust it?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we live in a world where everything we're looking at online, is it factual? Is it not? You know, I mean, when was the last time you're going onto your Yahoo page and being like, let me click on this because it must be fact, right?
Right.
So I think...
Did you just say Yahoo?
Right, exactly.
I think you're showing, was your Hotmail account not available today?
My AOL was hacked, so
Yeah.
I went on there. So I think from that standpoint, it's I don't understand it. I don't know what it does. Can I trust it? Is my information safe?
Right.
And I think as we evolve past that, especially now with Ethereum, the security coin, I think we'll just keep making leaps and bounds over the next few years.
What else is new in business? Jump over from blockchain. What else is going?
A lot of global business.
Yeah.
Which is good. And you know, I feel like we should be having a glass of rosé. Today's the first day I can.
Yeah,
Why
that's
are we
right.
here and not on the Riviera? I was going to bring you some rosé.
You live a far more wild life than we here at GoLocal, thus being local. We're not allowed to travel to places like Cannes. At your agency, what other trends are you seeing? Are you seeing growth? You know, we were talking the other day about the big Boston agencies are now a fraction of the size. You know, the Hill Holidays and the Havas's that used to have 1,000 people are now in the low hundreds. And is that the impact of Facebook? Is it the do-it-yourself factor that people can do so much within their own companies? Is it that they were so frustrated at big agencies and big fees that they brought it in-house and they're building their own marketing studios, and that they only outsource when they want some big thinking or to rejuvenate stuff? What's driving that?
So I think they're being a small agency with some big business.
Yeah.
And, you know, we have everything from mid-sized clients to now some really large ones. I think a lot of folks in companies they're really looking at their bottom line, and they really want to know what they're getting, and they're looking at fees and their procurement teams. If they have a procurement team, wants to see the true value, and they want to see, you know, that
They want to see
brand.
ROI.
They want to see the ROI. So I think what I'm seeing, and I'm seeing it firsthand in our agency, but I'm also, you know, seeing it happen with other companies, is the unbundle of media and creative. How everything got unbundled back like 20 years
Full-service
ago.
agencies that did everything.
Now they want it bundled back together. They want the media and creative, because you have your media partner and then you have your creative partner, but you need the technology that's going to fuel the media and the creative. People are going back to a bundled model.
Gotcha.
And it makes sense.
Well, congratulations on all the growth. Look forward to having continued discussions about new applications, how technology is transforming every last bit of what we all do together, and looking forward to learning more. And I hear you guys are sort of at the cutting edge of bringing in some national leaders into Rhode Island potentially.
Yeah, we're really excited.
So that's great. More to come on that front.
You bet.
Want to thank everybody. We're going to be right back in a minute. Thanks to Megan for coming on. We'll be back in a moment with Saul Kaplan at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Josh Fenton. Welcome to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Our friend, our innovating motivator, Saul Kaplan from Business Innovation Factory is here, as he is on most Mondays, which we always enjoy. This is going to be a discussion about pushback on innovation day.
Okay.
So,
what else is new?
No, I think there's, we're starting to see some of the fraying of some elements of innovation. Let's talk about the Washington Post gets bought by Jeff Bezos, and he's the savior, and he's going to pour tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. And according to folks that I know in the newspaper industry, he has literally poured hundreds of millions of dollars into the newspaper to modernize it, to make it a digital powerhouse, to strengthen it, to hire. This weekend, 400 plus members of their union band together and say, you're a rich guy and you're not paying us enough. Right. Very publicly, kind of a thumb in the eye, they said they've been negotiating with him for a year. This is a little bit of the people rising up on the master in the big house up on the hill. What's your thoughts?
Well, I think this is the least of it. If you're an innovator, if you're Jeff Bezos, you're accustomed to it. Everybody loves innovation until it affects them. Yeah. The minute it affects them, then let it be for the other guy, let it be for the other company, let it be for the other guy.
But this one's a little unusual in which there hasn't been layoffs at the Post. It's been, he's pouring capital in. They haven't seen it like the Providence Journal or the Denver Post, where the newsrooms have just been slashed to smithereens.
So first of all, he bought Washington Post
personally,
not Amazon. So let's be clear about what we're talking about here. Second of all, it's working. They're doing really well. Now, some of that is the political climate. That's low-hanging fruit for journalism everywhere, which is great. But let's look at what's gone on at the Washington Post. Beyond the market conditions, I mean, they made a huge investment in digital. Too slow for the industry, but it's actually working, right? Digital subscribers have doubled. Their visits, have increased by more than 50%. They made all their advertising targets. So what would you expect? You expect the employees to say, okay, you're a multi-billionaire. Like, we expect to be paid more money. This is normal. This happens. Now, I think one of the most interesting parts of this, the 400 of them signed this letter saying, hey, share some of that with us, and they should ask for that, right? And I'm sure they'll negotiate, where they're going to end up, like all entities do. But of course, our president has to get into the game. So POTUS tweeted, like, I hope you all go out on strike at the Washington Post. And then immediately the group, the 400 of them that were represented by the union, came back and said, no, not so fast, Mr. President. We stand behind Jeff Bezos and what he stands for. This is an industry, that is under siege, right? And I don't mean politically. I mean from disruption. From disruption. Here comes somebody with deep pockets who buys it, actually starts to turn them in the right direction. And that letter actually started out, the 400 union employees. The first paragraph was, we are really grateful that you saved our ass, excuse my French, but they didn't say that, but something like that. Like, thank you for coming in and taking a stand, and being there for us. But, in capital letters, we'd like you to pay us more. Right. If you think this is pushback on an innovator, this is normal stuff. Let's see where the negotiation goes. I think in the end, the employees should be pretty darn happy that they still get to do the incredible work they do at the Washington Post, right, in an industry that's collapsing all around them.
So a similar thing happened. A billionaire funded what was called DNA Info and the Gothamist, and it was supposedly for profit, but he was pouring in tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions on an annual basis. And it grew, and it became an important part of the fiber of New York. And also we opened DNA Info in Chicago. They unionized one day, voted. That next day he closed all 3 of those publications. You know, listen, I know there's a mantra that the Washington Post is now profitable. You know, I think there's also a question of how much he's investing while they're getting profitable, and how much. You know, it's a privately held company. We'll never know the answer.
You don't see the details.
So, you know, is there a is this? Are we really seeing it in its most boiled down conflict of, boy, oh boy, this disruption is absolutely going to see further conflict between worker and organization?
Yes, because I think, like with all disruption, it unsettles some of the way things have always worked, right? So this has to shake out. There's going to always be a normal tension, right, between management and labor. You know, although I hate to cast it that way, right? But in the end, particularly, this has been going on forever, right? Where the labor argument is, look at those executives and how much money they pay themselves, you know, versus how much they share. And this is all a negotiating ploy to get to the right balance, right? Without having a point of view that one side of this argument is right or wrong. This is the way it works. And when you're in the public sphere, like someone like Jeff Bezos is, expect those letters to come, expect them to be published so that everybody can be part of the discussion. You know what? I think it's healthy. I think we're going to continue to see it. I don't think it's anything particularly unique about this. I think in the end, that the fact that those same employees, right, and that same union came back and said, wait a minute, Mr. President,
we're not quite there.
We stand behind our leader, so we'll throw him under the bus when it comes to negotiating a little bit higher salaries and better benefits. But if you think that we're not grateful, you know, for what this guy's done at Washington Post and for the industry, we're grateful for it.
A few weeks ago here, you saw a division related to Amazon, who had set up shop here as sort of supply chain support and moving materials. They got challenged by the Teamsters. The Teamsters went in there. They went to I think, filed with the National Labor Relations Board. The National Labor Relations Board turned around and whacked the company. What did the company do? They packed up and moved to Hartford overnight, pretty much. Well, 60 days notice as they're required.
Anytime labor feels like its position and its leverage is being threatened, or any change in ownership is going to change that, it's a source of concern. And so they're going to work really hard, and they're entitled to work really hard on behalf of the people who are part of the union in order to get as much leverage as they can in the negotiation. And if it needs to play out in public, so be it. And that's a pretty common technique. You see that all the time, right? You know, where labor's not.
But they weren't messing around. They just literally out of town.
Yeah, but in the end, where's the real leverage here? If all things being equal, you want to be with the innovator, you want to be with the market maker who's changing the dynamic, because they're going to grow and win, and the chance of making higher wages and keeping your job are higher there than they are in thinking that you're going to lean against it and go back to some old world, you know, where people get paid more than what the company actually can afford to pay,
or wants to pay.
Exactly.
So last week we talked a little bit about how Amazon's starting to show their hand on how they're going to leverage Whole Foods. I think it was Wednesday or Thursday. It was announced in the Boston market between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. 2-hour delivery. I don't understand how they can do 2-hour delivery from a Whole Foods in Boston where you can't get anywhere in Boston in 2 hours.
Drones. It's got to be drones.
But that's the game is on, and that's launching right away. An absolute killer for competitors, right? I mean, 2-hour delivery, I can...
it's not even just two. I mean, it's 2-hour delivery that's free, right? You order more than $35, which at a Whole Foods, it's some grapes,
that's that's one egg roll.
Over $35 order, 2-hour delivery free in these test markets, Boston being one of them. This just happened last week, so it'll be interesting to watch that. I don't think we've seen the last of that. I'm pretty sure they're heading towards doing this everywhere as we head through the rest of the summer. There's also a 1-hour option. When you got the dinner party and you absolutely need it, and you need it right now, it's $7.99, for delivery. Same kind of order. A lot of people have been saying, wait, Amazon bought this a year ago. How come they haven't disrupted the whole grocery industry yet? How come it's taking longer? I look at that and say, just keep watching the movie. That's not how transformation happens. It doesn't happen overnight. They're going to play with new capabilities and new offerings. They're going to play with the balance between improving the online experience, coming this way to be able to use the 400 plus Whole Foods, right? That's more than the warehouses that they have.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So they should be able to meet that 2-hour window, having those 400 distribution points, right? But it'll also go the other way. The experience when you actually go into a Whole Foods. I saw a statistic, this blows me away. 60% of Whole Foods customer base are already Amazon Prime customers.
Oh, wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah, right.
I mean, talk about the strategic advantage and how they keep adding more value to the customer experience, and it's going to make it harder and harder to play the game the traditional way, either as an online supplier, right, or as a bricks and mortar store. And that's what we've been talking about, the evolution of these models, the blended models that reach the needs of particular groups of customers, different price points, different services, right, and they just keep experimenting with it. So while the market is looking for that one-size-fits-all breakthrough that's going to transform the whole industry, right, the way Jeff Bezos plays it is, let's do 1,000 experiments. Let's use these capabilities in lots of different ways. Let's make the shopping experience better in the store. Let's make the shopping experience better online. Let's blend the two of them together, right? Because all of these grocery online retailers, they haven't really been economic, right? They haven't really worked. So they've got to figure out how that model's going to work. I wouldn't bet against them, and we already know how much fear it's put into the traditional retailer.
Well, if you're some Port Clements market, I think it's down in Portsmouth, which is a very nice family-owned local market, it has got to just literally shake the foundation of your building. You've spent 3 generations building and having high-quality product and training and staff and everything else, and here turns around and somebody who was your loyal customer goes, God, I can just take care of that right before I leave the office, and bingo bango, so much for loyalty. And how do I compete with that? I can't amortize that technology.
You better be experimenting with new ways to deliver value in that local community, because they're going to be there, right? And so what can you do that can't be replicated either online or with the big store in a larger community? So you better be experimenting with that or you're going to lose. You want to talk about a loyalty program, right? You mean when 60% of your customers are on Amazon Prime, I mean, that's going to be the best loyalty platform, known to humankind, right? And that spreads across more goods, not just food. I mean, it's going to spread across every industry, and you're going to have to compete with that. And instead of lamenting it, if you're not innovating now, you better get on with it or you're going to be disrupted.
And how far is Amazon going to go? We've talked about it within this sphere. You've got they're fighting for global domination. You got Tesla fighting for global domination, and they announced they're going to cut 9% of their workforce, thousands and thousands of workers, in an effort to get profitable. They want to explode on the street and really drive the value of that company on Wall Street. The average company that's over here in downtown Providence, how does that company even think about competing with these, giant brains who are fearless and have unlimited access to capital?
Well,
they can afford to make 1,000 mistakes, right?
Not only afford to make 1,000 mistakes, they don't even have to make money early on.
Right.
So Tesla's a great, they're similar in some ways, right? How long did Jeff Bezos go before
a decade
before he ever made any money?
Right.
And he had no trouble raising capital in the market to pay for all those 1,000 experiments. Right. But even at Amazon, at some point, he had to start shifting and actually show a sustainable profit, right? To show that the multiple on his stock, was worthwhile. Now come over to Tesla and Elon Musk. 15 years this company has been in business and has never turned a profit.
No.
By design, just like with Jeff Bezos. Well, all good things have to come to an end. You can only go to the capital markets so many times until you actually can show a sustainable profit, right? That is the return on that capital.
Right.
And so Elon Musk says, okay, we'll come back to to the Model 3 and the production piece of this, but he looks at his cost structure. He looks at how many times he's gone to the capital markets, more than most mere mortals have been able to do, because people bet on him as a disruptor, as an innovator. But at some point, you have to actually show that you can turn a profit on the core business. And so he made a move this past week where he started to control the cost structure a little bit. He took out 9% of the costs, mostly people. Right? Out of the workforce.
He may have taken more out of the costs. We just know 9% of the workforce.
And he basically said, look, none of those people are involved with making our Model 3 production targets, because that's the driver of the future of this business.
And he's horrifically behind.
Right? And well, he just now, the reason the stock price went up was not just because he took money out of the workforce. The reason the stock price came back up, I think 40%, right, from its low this year, is because with credibility, they're getting close to this 5,000 cars a week production schedule, which was kind of the Maginot line. Like, we've got to get over this line. And the market believes him that he's now solved some of those scaling problems, right? But now he's starting to control the cost. He does not want to go back to the capital markets again, to do an additional raise. So this will give him credibility to be able to take the capital that's been invested and start to move towards profitability, which is what he needs to do. So I think this is a normal thing. I think it's inevitable. I think he defied gravity to get to this point, right? Because good luck, if you wanted to raise capital and you couldn't show where the profit was going to come from, good luck raising it. He's raised a ton of capital, right, and purposely didn't make money, just same way Jeff Bezos did. This is what innovation is about. If you are credible as an innovator and you can show that you have the credibility to reshape markets, capital will come to you and will be patient, right? And that's what we see here. So I don't think this is normal. Innovators face this all the time. The skepticism and pushback for what they do, but you watch the way these innovators behave. They're fearless. That you think this pushback is going to change what they're going to do in the case of Bezos and Elon Musk? I don't think so, right? But you have to play to the reality, and sooner or later, gravity brings you back to a sustainable business model that has a way to capture value, and then they'll keep doing it. They'll keep reinvesting and raising money based on the next vision, for the market. So
if I'm Nick, Ron, and Pete over at Cardi's, and I'm sitting there, and okay, a few years ago I started a mattress store, coming out of the Great Recession, with so many mattress retailers. What do I need to do in the thought process of reinventing and beginning to start to innovate? If I went into a Cardi's in Knightsville, Cranston in 1967, okay, it's bigger and it's fancier, but it's kind of a furniture store, and it was a furniture store then, and okay, there's more of them, but it's kind of the same experience.
Well, it's interesting. Some of those big superstores were the innovators, right? Just
like
they were in other retail segments. If you look at the furniture business, I mean, you want to talk about margins? I mean, from the design design to the manufacture all the way to your new bedroom set, right? The margins are incredible.
Right.
It happens to be big, bulky stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not a virtual product like a newspaper, right? So there's still a
Hard
physical product.
Hard to drop by a drone.
So it's taken longer.
Right.
But if you look at all the steps of that process, to be able to design, new furniture, to be able to manufacture that with new materials, right?
But if I'm Nick, Ron, and Pete, listen,
Right.
Josh Fenton can go order a couch on Amazon,
Correct.
on Prime, and have it here within 48 hours.
So now this is where they're at. So they were able to innovate just by creating this big superstore within
Right.
the region.
Warehouses,
right?
next
And
day
they
delivery.
got efficiency, where they bought on volume. They put pressure on suppliers to get stuff manufactured just for them,
Right.
at a lower price point that gave them more room to price. But that game is now they've got to go to the next game. You better get to the point where you understand the customer experience and you're thinking about new models, not just the big superstore bricks and mortar
Right.
model, and they should be experimenting with that too, because if they don't, right, you can already start to see some folks that are playing with that. You look at just the mattresses,
Yeah.
which is a lot of what they sell,
Right.
right, and they turn those things over. Go look for innovative mattress companies. There's a dozen of them,
Yeah.
that are building high-end brands, that are building
all
mid
online.
to low-ends, and you can buy them all online. They'll deliver them to you by tomorrow,
Yeah.
right? And so they're going to be disrupted too. See, my point has always been, that nobody is immune to this. No industry segment, and just because you think you can make the argument that it's furniture, it's a physical product,
Right.
No. People are looking at every aspect of that value chain, from the idea through the manufacturing to the creating demand, right, to fulfilling that demand through distribution, right? Everyone's looking at that value chain and trying to figure out, how they can disrupt it, right? So they can start, and you'll see a lot of startups there, but you're going to see some of the big players, that are going to realize that the disruption is inevitable and they've got to do something with it. So if I were them, I hope they have some experiments on different models to deliver customer value so that they're not caught flat-footed and those people end up losing their jobs too, like the rest of the big superstores did.
Is the economy being pretty decent, covering up for a lot of danger zones in industries like retail?
Yeah.
When we see the economic shift, which invariably is going to happen at some point or another, are we just going to see this? Listen, we're seeing enough major retailers collapse the last 24 months at a record pace. Is it going to be cataclysmic of collapse of key sectors like retail, and then in other sectors you're going to see innovation explode for survival purposes?
Well, the ones that exploded were the ones where the product was more virtual.
Yeah.
Right. Those were the first.
Right.
Right. When you get into a lot of these other industries where there's actual physical products and big capital necessary, in order to make those products.
Yeah.
It's slower there, but it's still going to happen, and you're going to see this happen over time. A lot of companies do what I call lean against it. Let's stop the disruptors, right? Let's be the taxi industry trying to prevent Uber from coming into
Laws
our
and
market.
regulation
We see
and
this in
things
a
like
lot
that.
of industries. Regulations that are just for the auto body
Protective.
industry,
Boston
just for
just passed
just for the
functionally a tough ban against Airbnb.
Right.
They really cracked down.
which is the
It makes
lean
it-
against.
Yeah.
Which is the lean against. They try to do it off of safety.
Yeah.
It's not in consumers' best interest.
Right.
To be able to do that, that's nonsense, right? We can deal with the safety issues and should, right? But when it comes to the business model and how we make more options available to consumers,
Yeah.
same thing is true in furniture, right? Same thing is true in every industry you want to talk about. This lean against, putting up a regulatory moat, I call it, right? So that disruptors can't get over the moat, right? You just saw Elon Musk do this really cool exchange, I think, with Warren Buffett, who said the way we value companies is how big the moat is,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
The barriers to
Right.
entry. And
Right.
Elon Musk swiped that, with the back of one of his hands and said, "You show me an industry, with a moat, I'll show you a target for disruption.
Yeah,
if you
right.
think you can lean against it with a moat, or you think you can win because you can go past something at the General Assembly that'll slow it
Yeah,
down,
no, it's not gonna
ultimately the consumer is going to win, and the consumer is smart enough to know when solutions are being withheld from them, for political reasons or because lobbyists were good at getting that regulatory mode in place.
Well, listen, thanks as always. This was a great discussion about the disruption backlash that we may be seeing. It's a wildly exciting time, and by the time tomorrow we'll have a whole new topic. This could be an afternoon show almost every day. Thanks as always. Last thing last, Biff. Who's the big new exciting? What's
here we go.
Who's the new shiny object?
Well, quickly, we want local people to be in the mix. So I don't know if you know Stephanie Ewens, local photographer.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
I love her work.
Yeah.
We've always loved her work at Biff. Do you know this will be our 14th year? I think this is true. I think she's been a photographer kind of behind the scenes, taking pictures of 13 years now. It'll be 14 years. So finally we said, enough with her behind the scene taking pictures. I'm going to put her on the stage,
and she's going to take pictures
share.
Of
well, I'm sure she'll do that too, because it's a nice vantage point from the stage. But I want her to share her personal story of what's it felt like to see this, through the lens of the camera. And she's got all the footage.
Let me tell you, she did one around our first or second year. She did a story of, and it was mostly stills with audio. About a tailor up on, I think, Broadway. And it's as beautiful a piece, smart a piece as you'll ever see. And maybe we'll resurrect it and run it again on Biff Week. So that's a great pick.
I'm excited. We asked Stephanie. We weren't 100% sure she would but she thought about it and she said, you know what? I do have a story to tell, and I have all of these artifacts, these pictures.
Yeah, that's right.
Of 14 years of Biff. To looking at innovation through the lens of the camera. I think it's going to be a great story, and I love when local people represent in our mix.
That's great. Thank you as always. We'll be back tomorrow. Kate Nagel's got the afternoon. It is, we're out of budget week. We're into final week of the General Assembly. PAWSOX legislation getting revisited for the 1400th time. Fights up at all the candidates running for governor. Lots of things going on. We'll see you back tomorrow. Thanks everybody for tuning into a busy day of business coverage on GoLocal Live. See you tomorrow. Thank you.